Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Crypto Conversion Podcast. As always, it's your host, Branden, joined by my co-hosts, Connor and Matt. Gentlemen, how you doing this evening?
Great. Thanks for asking again.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
just enjoying life. It's supposed to snow here tomorrow, so
Oof.
looking
Oh,
forward to that.
we have that snow today, Matt. So be happy
Oh,
to
it's
send
coming
it
my
your
way.
direction. Yep. I thought
Thanks,
it
I
was going to
appreciate
be
it.
I thought it was going to be more south, but I was like, shoot, it hit us, and so yeah, living in it right now. Gotta love March in the Midwest.
I
I
Connor,
almost
we
appreciate it.
won't talk about where you are. You don't
I
get
almost
snow.
considered turning the AC on today. It's so hot.
Oh my gosh, this guy.
It was
All
so warm
right.
I didn't wear a coat outside. I just had the sweater on.
All right. Well,
Uh,
enough about the weather. Let's get into the news that captivated us this week. Matt, I'll let you get the ball rolling.
Sure. So I was really intrigued. I know I mentioned, I think it was a couple episodes ago now, I talked about Ordinals, which is kind of an NFT on Bitcoin, where they take a Satoshi, the smallest unit, and they inscribe this data on it, which is stored on the blockchain, which is cool. It's all there's no kind of pointers to IPFS or anything. It's all kind of on native to the Bitcoin blockchain. I recently saw this thing called sovereign rollups, and so also to add to our discussion on rollups, this is another term for us. Um, it, the upgrade to Bitcoin Taproot that allowed for people to use this, like create ordinals to like use the entire space of a block. People realized shortly after that they could use rollup technology, and a rollup. As these things keep coming out, I feel like I understand it just a little better every time. So the rollup is doing computations off chain, but then they send some proof of those computations, some summary of those computations to the blockchain. And so, the Ethereum rollups like Optimism or the zero knowledge ones, and they do all these computations, and then every once in a while they kind of put all of that, they compress it, put it all, roll it up into a block on Ethereum so that you have this Ethereum security. So these sovereign rollups are going to be different than Optimism or the zero knowledge rollups in that it's not it won't have this kind of seamless, trustless bridge the way those ones do, but this is kind of we'll call it a first step. So I'm excited to see what they can do with this. I'm excited to see, at the very least, they can perform these computations and send them back to the blockchain. I don't know what's missing, but there's some piece missing where it's not perfect yet. It's not as good as the Ethereum ones where you can kind of, ensure anybody can ensure their funds can bridge back and forth. But anyway, positive step. Looking forward to seeing what happens there.
Isn't the Lightning Network itself kind of a rollup?
No, it's not a roll up because they don't roll they don't like send any of that information back down to the Bitcoin blockchain. It's a layer 2 in that it's, you can seamlessly get from Bitcoin to Lightning. But once you're on Lightning, I think they call it like a gossip channels or gossip network, in that the nodes are communicating with each other in terms of who has Bitcoin or Sats up there, and who traded with who, and they're just kind of individually keeping track of that. But it's not, no transaction on the Lightning Network is going to be sent back down to the blockchain.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not honestly. Sometimes I understand where you're coming from, Matt, but I also am not as tech savvy as you are. So I just kind of trust your expertise with some of this stuff because it blows my mind every time because it's not the same news that I look at. Like you and I both still look for on-chain analysis, but we're looking for completely different things. So when I look at on-chain analysis, I'm looking for these vestiges of crypto past and some of these ancient Bitcoins. So the Silk Road, we've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but it was one of the first large ways that a lot of people would transact using cryptocurrency, most of the time for illegal substances and things of that nature. But overall, a really interesting story. And one that the US government got heavily involved. So much so they confiscated thousands of cryptocurrencies, and I, I'm not sure how much Bitcoin the US government has, but I think they have quite a bit. And we just don't know until they move that Bitcoin on chain, which is what they did to Coinbase this week. Approximately 50,000 Bitcoin the US government sold to Coinbase. I am not sure at what cost it was sold, because this is kind of the beauty of Bitcoin, where it's not necessarily the value that the price that the market says it is, because if you're just doing a peer-to-peer transaction, like for all we know the US government could be giving those Bitcoin to Coinbase free of charge. Probably not, but we can at least assume that it's probably below market value because of how much ball Coinbase has been willing to play with regulation in the United States, just how easy they have made it for the United States. And they are also they also have shareholders to report back to, so there's that as well. But this is just really interesting. I don't know if it has anything to do with the bear run we're seeing as we're recording right now, but it could attribute to something, because that's a lot of Bitcoin, and that's a very influential amount of Bitcoin. And I think that the US government is building their hedges against CZ and Binance. And I think that this is a step in that direction in some capacity. So I don't know what you guys thought about that, but this is some of the on-chain stuff that I like discovering, is like, when are some of these Bitcoin that are just sitting all of a sudden moving, and where are they moving to, and why are they moving? Because I feel like that influences markets, and at an arbitrage level, but also just like, what are the people behind that doing, and what are their motives? So I'm not sure what you guys think about that, but that's stuff that I enjoy looking at.
Did you say that Coinbase did receive the government funds, or was the
Based
government?
on
Yeah.
based on the chain analysis, yeah.
So they didn't just transfer. Are they waiting to sell? Is the government waiting to sell, or is it in,
No,
say,
they moved
Coinbase's vaults?
the what? No, they moved the Bitcoin to Coinbase. One of
Yeah, but like, is
Coinbase's,
it on an account?
yeah,
No, this is a good question from Connor.
the
Like, is
wallet,
it the
all of
government's
the
account, or did they sell it to
Right.
Bitcoin
yeah.
or
So
Coinbase?
so there's so there so the wallet to wallet transaction was from a wallet that was being held by people attached to the U.S. government, and the confiscation of Silk Road's Bitcoin to
Mhm.
Coinbase.
Yeah, but every time I send money to Coinbase, it's the same thing,
Yeah.
because my money, when I get sent it to Coinbase, is going to a Coinbase wallet. That doesn't mean that Coinbase is buying it from me.
Well, I think Coinbase has a lot more sophisticated wallets than what their platform offers. So
In my
I'm assuming that it's going to a vault of some sort or something like that.
if
But
Coinbase bought the Bitcoin from them, it might not actually have been the government decision per se. It might have been
true.
Coinbase going in and saying, "Hey, we know you have all this Bitcoin." Uh, and a lot of times, big market movers will do this. They'll make deals, off market, so that they don't influence, the larger market, which is good for us. It might
Yeah,
have been a
but
good thing on
Connor,
Coinbase's end.
but in Bitcoin, that in crypto that gets confiscated, that stuff gets sold in auctions.
Yeah,
So it and you and I don't know if I'll ever be in the same room as to have access to see what goes on in these auctions. I would just love, I don't want to be a bidder. I just want to see the process, because this is fascinating to me, because federal auctions happen all the time for valuable items that get stolen,
true.
or there's no like ownership to them. These auctions happen, and this is what happens with crypto that gets confiscated. So
Right.
I think it's an interesting world that have been trying to learn more about for years, since I've been getting involved with cryptocurrency, because there's more vacant crypto out there that's just not being talked about, that has market implications all the same as the Bitcoin you and I hold, but
Right.
it's even more so. It's just interesting to me, and I want to learn more of where it is,
Yeah.
why it is where it is, and I also just want to know why Coinbase. Like it's just interesting to me. That's all.
True.
Yeah. So I think, Matt, I'm going to let you start our conversation on our topics this evening, being that we just got our news
I did just
portion
want to,
done.
sorry, before we
Oh,
jump into the conversation, I did just want to bring to the attention because I follow a lot that happens with the ENS DAO, and there's been kind of a blow up over the past week since uh, what was that?
ETH
ETH
Denver.
Denver. It was in Denver,
Yeah.
right? Okay. But apparently, some people are claiming there were conversations with both DAO leaders and ENS Labs, who manages the actual protocol or the creation of the protocol so far. But apparently, there's been attestations that conversations were had about potentially blocking or blacklisting um, certain names that are copyrighted, like company trademarks. And people are claiming that the NSDAO is going to start to strip names held by holders that are copyrighted by like Disney or McDonald's or Amazon or whatever. So those claims were made. A lot of people that claim to have, or said to have made those claims, have denied it. And then there are also questions about whether or not it's possible. And just knowing from my research, and Nick, the creator of ENS, has said this. And some people said he was lying, but it's not that he was lying. This is how it works. So the actual registration contract itself has been locked. So you cannot take somebody's name that they hold, so long as the renewal is current. What is not locked is the contract that controls pricing of renewals. And the reason that's not locked is because you don't know, what what's going to be the best registration price for renewal in the future, right? As we deal with inflation and whatever of normal currency. So it's very difficult to lock that contract right now. And because that contract's not locked, it is possible to target certain addresses for renewal and basically prevent them from renewing by either increasing the price for that,
Whoa.
or whatever. But so long as renewal is current, that change can't take effect. But that being said, because that contract's open, that is a danger with ENS, is that a rogue DAO or whatever can potentially target and blacklist addresses through that method. So I'm glad the conversation's happening. There's been a lot of misinformation I've seen going on both sides, but I am glad the conversation's happening for that reason, because I noticed that is a potential weakness in the protocol.
For sure. Yeah, very definitely interesting to see what can and can't be done in some of these these big protocols. I see it all the time. I follow I think one of you guys mentioned him to me, Chris Black seems to be one who's really on any of the big protocols to say, hey, this is a point of failure. This is a centralization point where, there are a few people who could make a decision. And so, yeah, definitely good to see where those are and think about the risks. And really, I think this is a great transition into our topic today. Last week, we were talking about decentralization, and we talked a lot about the financial side of it and the, kind of physical life of it, right? Whether you live on a farm or run a website, but and what we wanted to talk about today is what does it mean to kind of be in Web3? What does Web3 mean? How do you live a Web3 life? And so there is a difference, right? As you're pointing out, Connor, ENS is definitely Web3. That's our Web3 identities. That's, when we sign in somewhere with Ethereum, or someone wants to pay us, they, can pay Connor.eth. I don't know if you have that one, but,
Unfortunately, I
this,
don't. I wish I did, but
this is your username. This is your identity.
I
And
think that's selling for like 80 ETH last I checked on
oh
OpenSea.
I'll
gosh, yeah,
show
exactly. I bet
I'll
any
show
first
mine.
name is.
You can send me ETH at brandentim.eth if you so
I have
choose to.
I have cmahoneymusic.eth.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I got
Brandentim.eth. Again, in case people didn't hear that.
that's great.
Just
That's
kidding.
great. I got McBags with a Z at the end, so I'm
Nice.
happy with that one. But yeah, so anyway, so let's think about first, maybe let's clear this up a little more. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add to this. What's the difference between Web3 and decentralization, even if they have maybe similar aims? How do we differentiate the two? And then let's just talk about what is Web3, what does it mean, and how are we going to live a Web3 life? What's the future of the web? What's that look like? How are certain protocols changing that right now? So, yeah, anyone want to hop on? Connor, I think you had a great point there, but you didn't explicitly say it. So I don't know if you want to add on, or Branden, if you want to jump in. Decentralization and Web3, where's the overlap? Where's the difference?
Yeah, man, so many ideas go through my head sometimes. I can't remember, but in my mind, Web3 and decentralization are mostly divided by the question of immutability. Like information that is written to the blockchain, it's not just that it exists decentralized and there's no centralized force that can basically censor it or take it off or wipe it out of existence. Um, it's that it exists there forever. Basically, that's what Web3, the three pillars of Web3: immutability, transparency, and then decentralization. So the difference between a Web3 protocol and, say, a non-Web3 protocol such as IPFS, or you know, uh, like a taunting type of protocol, is that it's decentralized, it's peer-to-peer, but it's not permanent. The information relies on individuals basically contributing to the peer-to-peer network. So that is the main difference, at least in the computer world, to me, between a purely decentralized protocol and Web3.
How do you do that though? Because I feel like even a blockchain, theoretically, and maybe there's an issue when it comes down to the math and the algorithm, but like if I got everybody who ran a Bitcoin node to agree, like maybe we just take out a block. Like it is dependent on everybody storing and sharing that information, right? So
Right.
I don't know. I almost think that like torrenting, even if it's not Web3, like I almost think that was a good like pre Web3. I don't know, and I could be wrong, but I don't know how do you deal with that?
No, I mean, that's definitely a great point. Actually, Brantley, when I was having the conversation with him at the Catholic Crypto Conference, was basically saying the same thing. It is a good point to realize. Like, yeah, we're not building uncensorable protocols, immutable protocols. We're building censorship resistant protocols and very difficult to change protocols, right? So yeah, so in that sense, no, I mean that's definitely true. Like everything, it's always a possibility out there. Um, yeah, so I guess the main difference then, if you're going to just accept that, first of all, I would still say that there's a level of immutability there that is
Mm,
possible because of blockchain technology that is
sure.
not possible with other decentralized technologies. But I would say that one of the core differences then between Web3 and other decentralized protocols is that the ecosystem is coherent. When you're building on Web3, you're building on a standardized or a developing standardization of protocols that all can communicate with each other and
Mhm.
interoperate.
Yep. I agree with what Connor said there. Just looking for that interoperability between projects, just being able to communicate with each other. I think like the big issue that we're seeing right now is being able to have those bridges between protocol to protocol without potential hacks or just nefarious activity, unfortunately. That's something that needs to get buttoned up, and I'm not sure how that happens or when that happens, but it's something that's being worked on. And I also think a little bit too with some of it, like I look at And I guess this is more of the exchange stuff, but it's like I think the beauty of Web3 is that you can avoid the KYC or the whole like here's my email address that's associated with my identification basically can get traced back to me. I think that Web3 provides alternatives to anonymity if you so choose to go down that rabbit hole. For whatever reason, I respect it, and there's some that do choose to do that. But yeah, I think ultimately, like when you're building on blockchain, you're talking about something that is I wouldn't say like it's well one it's kind of like an indelible mark, but it's something that can get built upon or even extended further. And I guess that's kind of the beauty of it is that people can pick up code and just start working on it, kind of like what we saw with the resurgence with Dogecoin a couple years ago. All of a sudden everybody started plugging into it, and I know a lot of people mostly arbitraged that one, but it probably reinvigorated a group of people that didn't know what a Dogecoin was until Elon Musk talked about it. And then who knows, if I'm like a coder and I'm like, what is this stuff? That could have been my first exposure to that, and just looking for new opportunities to build upon that. You never know who you're going to inspire when people start going in the rabbit hole of what Web3 and blockchain can do. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just to build off of what you just said, and this is, if we talk about maybe torrenting as a precursor in terms of the decentralized side, I think the open source movement is kind of a precursor as well, because you have these public blockchains, and they do have developers. So if you were trying to work on Dogecoin, I think you have to kind of contribute to the core blockchain, the core team, the core project. But Ethereum and all these smart contract chains, you open source, you publish on the blockchain, right? So like everything is open source. If I want to take something from a token contract or another smart contract, I can find them. I can say, oh, that's what you're doing there. I'm going to improve upon it. I'm going to, take that and add some of this too. So I think that's kind of cool as well. So I think that's just kind of another, like, the precursors kind of evolving into Web3. Sorry, Connor, I cut you off.
No, yeah, that's exactly true. And like you say, like torrenting is kind of like a precursor in the decentralized world. But really, like the whole internet is a precursor to Web3 because
Yeah.
the whole internet was a decentralization project. Like you just had people throwing up websites, creating protocols, writing code, and things just started to develop. But it developed almost in like um, a Windows, Microsoft computing platform where it's just you have all of these separate components and your HP and your Dells, and they're all just kind of building things and trying to make it work, right? And that's kind of what Microsoft or the Windows platform is. You have um, it's very decentralized. Obviously, anybody can kind of create a computer and then run Windows on it. The difference is with Apple, like you have this ecosystem where everything works together, right? But it's Apple that's the centralizing force that is making things work together. And with blockchain and with Web3, it's almost like we're creating an Apple that's not one centralized source. We're creating a platform, and all the protocols that are springing up automatically communicate with each other because we're building on these same kind of values and these same standards and all those types of things. So we're reinventing the web. And I say this because I was actually in a conversation yesterday, and this is what got me thinking about it. But they were saying like, okay, like the only thing useful about blockchain is that we're able to build trustless systems. If you trusted a centralizing database, like you can create NFTs without having to rely on blockchain. And plus, blockchain is kind of unproductive because it's expensive and there's gas costs and it's slower than a lot of other networks, which is true. But it's not just that we're not just creating something that's the only benefit is that you don't have to trust anybody. We actually are creating a platform where things communicate with each other much easier, right? Like I can take my NFT and my NFT token follows a standardizing kind of token standard, right?
Mhm.
And I can go from wallet to wallet. I can go from protocol to protocol, and my NFT can theoretically interact with everything because it's all standardized, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I would double down. I think the trustless thing helps, right?
mhm.
That's the whole point of, I mean, the blockchain to send a transaction, right? Bitcoin's trustless peer to peer
Yep.
transacting, but smart contracts are trustless because, it follows an algorithm and it automatically, run, not automatically, but it
Sure.
it completely runs. It either runs or it doesn't. When I try to make a transaction, and I think that's huge. I think that is
Right.
a great thing, and that's what enables all this, right? Because
Yeah.
there's something there that I don't have to I don't have to trust this person to hold my funds while somebody else transfers me that. This
Mhm.
smart contract will do that on its own.
Yeah.
It will
And
hold my funds and unlock it when these conditions are met or whatever it is.
we were
Yeah.
doing this in Web 2 with IP to IP. You look at some of the applications that I would have used in high school. I don't know if any of you guys ever dabbled with getting your music off LimeWire, but that was that was a peer-to-peer platform essentially where it was like, all right, I'm downloading LimeWire and anybody that wants to have access to my files on my computer has access to my files on my computer. In turn, I get access to everybody else that has LimeWire's files on their computer, vice versa. So it was a big network of people being able to download MP3 music or other files from other people's computers, and it caused a real controversy. And there was a lot of cease and assist that happened because of it. But it was a very peer-to-peer network, IP to IP address that was all connected, so people could just download music for free instead of having to pay for it on iTunes.
Mhm.
It's kind of funny actually because LimeWire is trying to get into the NFT space now,
Yeah, I
or I'm
saw
not
that. Yeah.
sure who like has trademarked the name or like has resurged it. I always thought it would be funny to make LimeWire rest in peace t-shirts, but now I guess it's not RIP. They've had a resurrection in the NFT space, but that was it was highly illegal, but everybody did it because everybody didn't want to have to pay Apple for their music. So that was just that based
I
on what
like how
we've been
you
talking
I like how you
about.
say you didn't want to pay Apple for the music as opposed to you didn't want to pay, the actual
Well,
artist for
let's
the music.
let's be honest. How much of that cut is Apple
Very true.
actually giving the artist? You know what I mean?
No, very
Sure.
true. As a musician, I know there's very little
Yeah.
that gets back to the artist.
So this was pre Spotify days too. So but yeah, it was like that was what you did. You downloaded LimeWire, basically said, "Yes, LimeWire, anybody can access the files on my computer. Hope I don't have anything too sensitive on there." And then anybody could download anything. It was awesome.
So Connor, as an artist, and I'm intrigued because I've kind of seen some differing opinions here. Um, have you looked into music NFTs? Like, I've seen people, artists, especially because so many of these art NFTs have been popular. They like NFTs. They like that they can create things, can directly sell to people who want to buy them. They can collect royalties when it gets resold. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there? This is kind of like, sure, the torrenting hurted anyone who made music. I
Mhm.
mean, maybe like we said, maybe it hurt Apple more than it hurt the artist, but it definitely hurt both. I don't know what like. How does this help the people creating? How does Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this we could have like a whole conversation on this alone because I have a lot of thoughts on it. But yeah, I
Sure.
have looked into music NFTs. I haven't dropped anything myself. I am working. I say working. I mean, me and a friend have been working on this project for easily a year at this point. So I'm not sure if it's going to see the light of day, but I hope it will because I think it's kind of a cool project. It involves music in it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of good things in the space, and I think there's a lot of just you know um, razzle dazzle, whatever in this space. So there's I think a lot of artists are not using it to its full potential. They're just kind of using it as like another source of income. Oh yeah, I'll sell some little collectability kind of
Mhm.
token, and I can get a little extra cash on the side. Um, I think what NFTs for an artist, particularly for a music artist, what they have the best potential is it's very difficult as an artist to make money doing anything but playing live shows. Obviously,
Yes.
like we just said, very little music that gets recorded actually ends up back in the pockets of the artist. I mean, the money doesn't end up in the back pockets of the artist because just the way the system is set up, it just they get a very small cut at the end of the day.
Connor,
That's just the
Connor,
reality of it.
can I interject here? This is
Yep.
why you see the big artists making their own record labels. This is why Drake has OVO. This is why Taylor Swift re-recorded all of her stuff and released it. This is why you see the biggest artists building their own things. Death Row, Snoop Dogg. I dabbled in listening to rap quite a bit growing up in a basketball family. It's just what you it gets played
Right.
around your peers. So being around that, I've been able to kind of and I dabbled in music industry a little bit myself, Connor. I'm not a composer, but I sang, and so I know what you go through from that
Yeah.
area. It's
But
a very it's
it's a
bad.
little
Yeah.
it's a little more complicated than that too, because it's not
Yeah.
really just the actual industry itself that's cheaping the artists. I mean, it is the industry. I was going to say it's not the publishing companies themselves, the
Sure.
record companies. It is, in a large degree, it is. But it's also just the fact that the industry itself has suffered from basically decentralizing technologies that allowed people to just download music without paying. So the actual money share of the whole industry has tanked since the internet. And because of that, the publishing companies are getting more greedy, and then artists are making less money because there's not that much money to go around overall in the
No.
recording side of it. And that's why you see a lot of these big bands like Aerosmith and they're launching world tours again because they're trying because they need the money because they're not making money from selling records anymore. That's the
Yeah,
reality of it. You would be
it's cre-
surprised how many big name artists need to go on tour to pay bills every year.
Yeah, that's why you see all those bands from the 70s and 80s still going on tour. That's why the Rolling
Exactly.
Stones are still rolling out there because they don't own their own catalogs. And
But even if
instead,
they did, I'm saying the
yeah,
money's not really there. They need to
no,
tour. So
for sure.
Yeah, could Web3 like further fix this in some way?
well,
Yes.
Is there
that's
a way to
yeah. Let's get back to Web3 because that's what I was
like
going to say.
I'm curious, like is it something about the playing rights of it? Is there something to like is there a way to guarantee every time it's streamed that like some kickback comes to me because I own it? I don't know. I don't know enough about the legal
This
side or
is
the ownership side to
The
know what
royalties
would
need to
help.
get back to the artist pockets and not the publishing, like the music publishing companies.
But how would you do that in a streaming world, in a streaming
Sure.
and downloading world?
Connor,
Sorry,
no,
I'll
Connor,
let
jump in.
I'll
You're
let you
so
go.
let me
Yeah.
say my opinion here. This is the real red pill in the music NFT space. At least in my opinion, I could be wrong,
yeah.
but I think we kind of just have to accept that the recording industry, like, there's not going to be payments from royalties that are really making a musician's day in a long time because nobody wants to pay for music that way. Unfortunately, I think that's just the reality. And so, but what I think NFTs have the potential to do is kind of return us to what the music industry used to be, which was totally reliant on patrons. Um, so now we basically have democratized like how patronage works with the record industry, and that the musician and artists have to cater to hundreds, thousands, millions of fans, basically to make money. So basically, their incentive is to make their music as much of a mass appeal as possible, right? And in the olden days, it was basically a handful of very rich patrons that liked an artist and would just give them money to basically create art. And then the art that the artist created was basically free for people to enjoy. And there was a lot of good things about that system. One, it removed the need of mass appeal for the artist and let them really dive into the creation of art that they really liked and enjoyed. And then also it was free. There was no streaming. There was no buying records, right? You would just go and you would listen to the music for free. I mean, I know there was whatever. You would have to pay for concerts sometimes, I imagine, and whatnot, to pay the musicians to actually perform it. but we're all very used to paying for live music anyway. Um, so what NFTs allow people to do is create a small kind of like collection, and then that a much higher price. But these are your true fans. These are people who really want to, support you, and they're going to pay a much higher price to basically be a patron of you, be a supporter of you, and maybe you give them some kickbacks, maybe you give them some extra things. But instead of catering to basically millions of fans, now you're going to cater to a small group of your NFT collectors, right? And you can kind of turn that into like a new patronage type system to make money in the music industry. Does that make sense? I kind of
Yes.
I'm not sure I explained
Yeah.
it totally to.
No,
No, I like
Connor,
that.
it made sense. Yeah. The thing about it is it's going to take somebody the likes of a Taylor Swift though to move her catalog to like an Audius or something like that to really send waves to other artists that this is the move, because I know of a couple artists that released an album on Audius and they promoted it, but it did not hit, and it kind of flopped. And so right now I'm on Audius right now. Like I see some stuff from Steve Aoki, Skrillex, but like those are niche audiences. I mean I feel like a lot of Web3 people would be into that type of music, so they actually are doing pretty well on it. But until we see more mainstream artists moving over to the Web3 direction, that's what will cause for more integration in the space and people that wouldn't normally be in the space to move towards it. Kind of like what we saw with artists and NFTs. All of a sudden, we saw a bunch of artists that didn't care about crypto or blockchain, but saw a way to do art in a digital way that they didn't even think was possible, plus get paid for it on the side. It shifted a whole new audience into crypto because of what NFTs were capable of, which is really
Right.
cool. So,
Well, because what NFTs
yeah,
did is they made digital art collectible, and that was
yeah,
something that wasn't really thought of. It's not that you couldn't collect digital art; it's just that people didn't because you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I do think music might have a harder time, right? If I can prove that I own this ape, which is slightly different than the ape you own, like there's something collectible there where music, it's not like I own this slightly different recording of the song. It's a song, right? And it's
yeah,
you'd have to listen to it to find, if there was a difference, you'd have to listen to it to find the difference. Where
Well, yeah, I
it's
think
not like
in
a
general, music would
visual, like
just.
this is my avatar, is my slightly different recording of Connor's song. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I do wonder if how music will have to break into that. I mean, a lot of the NFT appeal, I think, is at least what people think about is the art. If I talk to anybody about an NFT, I'm like, I'm trying to say, look, no, you can, just send out an NFT and it tells you that, oh, that person or that wallet like was
Mhm.
there, or you send that to them and they're like, okay, but what does it look like? And it's like,
Right.
it doesn't have to look like something.
Yeah. No, true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
yeah. I think part of the problem too is people want to come into Web3 and replicate Web2 systems on Web3. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the mistake. So it's not like so much that, and to be fair, I really have not looked into Audius that much. So I don't totally understand what their platform is. I know it's a music streaming platform. I don't understand what makes it different from, say, like SoundCloud. I'm sure there's something there, but I don't. I just wouldn't look at like how many people are using Audius as per se like a example of adoption. Because I think there's a different way to adopt. Is I guess what I'm saying. I think there's a
yeah.
different mindset that can kind of be collected when you start to realize that you have a potential with Web3 to do something that you can't necessarily do in Web2.
I think we need to take. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to what happened in Web 2, but what we need to do is reimagine everything that we wanted in those Web 2 applications and just build them better on Web 3. Like
Yeah.
that, and I think that's what you're saying, cuz it's just we can't just copy and paste.
Yeah.
It won't, we'll never make progress that way. And I would agree there's a lot of applications that seem to just be like, okay, now let's do it tokenized, crypto, blockchain, boom, here's a token. And it's like, what did that solve? It didn't fix it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's a good question, and to bring it outside the music space and just to
Yeah.
generalize it, what can Web3 improve upon for Web2? I mean, we
Yeah.
talk in general, right? It's nice to have this decentralization, this immutability, things
Yeah.
like that. But how is Noster better than Twitter? What are, if
Yeah.
we can name examples, like what makes, ENS, one thing that it does is with the immutability, I like that it guarantees that I have that username, right? So if every website used that as my login, I wouldn't have to worry about getting on Twitter first to get McBags, or,
Mhm.
Reddit to get that username, or I don't know. So like that's an improvement, that interoperability part.
Mhm.
I don't know. What are there examples that come to mind? Like how either does or how would Web3 improve upon kind of these Web2 things?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great example with ENS, and it's kind of like a broader thing about what Web3 is trying to do in general, which is there was no centralizing force which says, hey, we're going to create the internet in such a way that people are totally trapped into whatever platforms they create their account on. And then we can just like manipulate them and force them to abide by like, you know, potentially like morally outrageous terms of conduct, or censor them in such a way that they feel afraid to say things because otherwise we're just going to strip them of their accounts, right? There was no like centralizing identity at the start of the internet that decided to make that happen. What happened is you had a bunch of people creating things, and we didn't create an interoperable standard which said, hey, why don't we let users of the internet own their own identity and we all follow this standard, and then we can just, take that identity from the standard protocol, and everybody owns their identity. We didn't do that. Instead, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and everything just said, hey, this is our platform, and we need some sort of identity for our platform, so let's create one. And so it just happened in actually a very decentralized fashion. But the value that it created was one that said that you shouldn't own your own identity. That shouldn't, be something that you fully control. So with Web3, we're able to say, let's create these values in the base level of a new internet that says, you own your own identity with ENS or with Handshake or whatever, or even with Nostr, right? Uh, that identity that you create on Amethyst is transferred automatically when you go to some other platform on Nostr. What do they have? Damus, Amethyst. I think there's a whole host of them. Anybody can create their own kind of social on the Nostr platform. And then not only your identity, but all of the content that you post is on the base chain, and all of these websites basically that are built on top of it are just pulling that information from basically something that you control and nobody else does, which is a better way to do it. It's a more interoperable way, but then we also make sure that those values align with what we want, which is decentralized uh, and privacy preserving. So the question was,
Sure.
how can we build or what's being built on Web3 that makes Web2 better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's
Branden,
excellent.
what do you think?
I like looking at some of the projects that do things that I already do in Web 2. So, for example, I there's a project that does fantasy football stuff, and it's really cool because they've built it on the Polygon chain, and every player is an NFT. And the stats that those players um, compile from the games of that weekend translate to token rewards if your team has done good or bad in your respective matchup amidst the league. So I like that. I think that's really cool, and how they've built that with using NFTs in a unique way. Obviously, they're not able to use the NFL royalties, but they can still produce the outcomes of what your reward is for how the players you selected did, and they also did it. March Madness is coming up on Sunday. The bracket will be released. They even NFT'd your bracket. So your selections that you made for how you thought the tournament would, the outcome of the tournament would be, they created kind of a fun pool for people to get it, and if you had the best bracket, you won 2.5-ish wrapped ETH. It was a really cool and inventive way that they're trying to do these Web2 applications that people enjoy doing and have fun doing, and bringing them to Web3. And so that's just an example of something simple that can be replicated on a Web3 platform, but nuanced and created in a fun and in a DAO type way. It's a DAO. I'm not going to say who it is because for reasons, but it's just it's really interesting, and I haven't integrated myself with the platform yet, from a monetary standpoint, but it's something that I've been watching from afar for over a year, and I'm just really impressed by it.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
yeah,
great. That's
that's
great.
what I want to see more of that, coming into Web3. Just simple things like that.
Yeah. I sort of along those lines. I was thinking one of the things I wanted to bring up in this conversation is gaming projects, like
Yeah.
not gaming like gambling, but gaming like video games. I know there's a lot of them that the current model, and so I work for a gaming project, right? So the current model is around NFTs and ownership, which is nice. It's good to you own that piece of the game, you own that character, whatever, and which is nice. And I think it would be cool to see if there was any like sort of interoperability. If somebody was like, "Oh, I'm going to make a fighting game that you can use." People from that game or that game or that game, and it kind of brought them all together. We're not seeing that though. That would be cool. That'd be cool if someone was building that. That's what I'm trying to say there.
No,
But
Matt, it
yeah,
really
yeah,
should get built, because
yeah.
think of like if League of Legends went on the blockchain, apparently it's like $2 billion in assets that are locked up in like game tokens
Hmm.
across the board. Like every game that you have to put money into to integrate with that game, apparently it's a very huge lump sum, but nobody can do anything with it because the it's locked into that game.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess, and so maybe if certain games start becoming very popular, and as long as they're on the same chain, I think that complicates things when they're on different blockchains. But
Yeah.
if they're on the same chain, I could say, oh, you can use your League of Legends characters and your whatever other game characters,
World
and
of Warcraft. Yeah.
they fight in the same space. Like that would be interesting to see. No, again, I don't think I've seen anyone doing that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anyone building like an
That would be the most
interoperable game.
epic Super Smash Bros. Ever.
Exactly. Yeah. What I did want to mention though is one of the things that blockchain does do, or it can do, if a game is built this way, from more of an architectural side. And we've been having these conversations a lot at Samurai Legends, and we like an MMO. I don't know if you ever play an MMO, but very few MMOs are truly like MMOs in that like you're usually not on the same server. You might be on the same server as the people around you, but it's not like the whole game is on one server. And I think blockchain gives that technology that this is a decentralized database, and you can include certain things on the blockchain, right? The blockchain is slow. I think Connor mentioned that earlier. So it's not like you can, do a live combat on the blockchain. That would be very hard to do, because you're kind of waiting for your transactions to process. But you can definitely record like game states on the blockchain, right? So if you were in this big map, maybe everybody's location is stored on the blockchain, and you have to move slowly, through
Mhm.
these different areas. I don't know. I like this idea of a big decentralized server, right? It's not like it's in an Amazon warehouse that everybody's connected to and playing on that, but this is
Yeah.
decentralized, and that's what it does. The blockchain records states, and so you
Yeah.
can, as long as you record, whatever it is, this, not just the pieces, but I'd like to see, and we're aiming to do this, but I'd like to see just more games hosted on the blockchain. Not just the pieces, but the games themselves hosted. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple things that gets me thinking. I always try to find ways to like categorize information so that I can kind of make sense of
Mhm.
it. Because particularly with like Web3, it's like you have all these projects and they're all doing, whatever they're doing. And it's like, how can I think about this? And I've heard somebody say before that what bootstraps basically the decentralized Web3 is you need three things to be all working together so that you can create a system that doesn't have any single point of failure, that doesn't rely on Web2 at all.
Mhm.
You need decentralized computing power, decentralized file storage, and then decentralized identity. And if you get those three right, then you can basically create a fully independent Web3.
Mhm.
So that's what Ethereum is, the decentralized compute,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So like, just like you said, that basically is what Ethereum is. It's a
Yeah.
server. It's a massive supercomputer server, right? Um, you still need the file storage, and Ethereum's not designed to do that. And I'm not a techie guy, so I'm not so sure that like okay, Amazon Web Services, that's a decentralized it's not a decentralized computer, sorry. It's a massive basically supercomputer in a way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what you host your website there and it's what's processing all of, what's running your website, all the visitors to it. It's processing all that information. But it's also storing the files, right? It's doing
Yep.
both. And so kind of in the traditional web, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, because you're the more techie guy here. But
I'm really not a huge techie guy. I'm
okay,
just
but
a little more like marginally
more
better
than
than these
me.
guys.
Okay. But
Just for anyone
file
listening.
storage and computing is
Just
happening.
casually dunk on us.
No, not even that. Like we're all
I'm
about the
just
same
I'm
level. Like it's
just a
just like,
little more.
it's
But but storage, okay, so file storage and computing
yeah.
kind of happens on the same system. Like it's the same thing really in the traditional web in a way, right? Like, but yeah,
Yeah. I guess I don't know whether they're in the exact same space. And you can think about, your own computer, right? You can have, um, like you can plug in like a big external hard drive, right? And all that does is store files where like your computer is computing. So I don't know if they're necessarily on the like exact same thing. Again,
Mhm.
I'm not a huge techie guy, so I can't tell you exactly how these things are made. But yeah, definitely. The blockchain is what makes this difficult to do. So as I've been following, to bring it back to where we started, as I've been following this Bitcoin ordinal stuff, like a Bitcoin block is 4 MB. I think I had a big floppy disk that was 4 MB, or a so like when I was a kid. So
Wow.
that's all the data you can process in, or computation, you can process in a 10-minute block if you're
yeah,
on the Bitcoin blockchain. So like, I was saying you can store these states, right? I can store like you're at that coordinate, at
mhm,
this point in time, but for it to be an enjoyable game, you need, kind of this fun front end to play with.
mhm,
But you raise a great point. Yeah, I wonder if it's possible to do both at the same time, or if
yeah,
they have to inherently be separate, but maybe,
yeah.
operable, interoperable.
Well, I kind of
I'm
feel
not
like
sure.
Web3 or blockchain kind of has to separate the two because of the nature of the way the blockchains work. Like
Hmm.
Ethereum can't do both file storage and the transaction processing. Or maybe it can. Maybe someone's going to come up with a blockchain that can in the future.
Yeah.
But as of right now, you have to think of Ethereum as almost like a giant supercomputer processor. Like it's processing information. Um, but it's not quite fast enough just because of the way blockchain works to do like the game you're talking about. But
Yeah.
it is a decentralized processor. So yeah, I I forget exactly where I was going with that, but this was really my second question though. I don't know if you've seen the new potential upgrade to Ethereum that's been proposed, but I've
Shanghai.
heard that yeah, there's a new EIP out. It's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to kind of remove the reliance on seed phrases. I don't know if it's totally going to make seed phrases obsolete, or but believe it or not, it's going to supposedly allow people to recover seed phrases if they lose them. Um, so that's one interesting thing. But the other thing I heard about it is particularly they're looking at gaming, and they're looking at creating a way in which things that happen in the game don't have to be recorded until the end of the game, in a way.
Mm.
So might be something to look into, but that might change basically whether or not it's possible to do what you want. If not every transaction has to happen,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
block speed time.
That's definitely interesting. I will. I'll dig into it.
I'm gonna have to send you the
And
link to
I
that because that's what I've heard
sure
about it. It's
this
particularly about
next
gaming.
episode we're gonna dive into it. No,
Yeah.
but no, that is cool. And I do wonder if you could do some sort of like a zero knowledge proof where
Right.
all you
It's like
have
a
to
second
send
layer
is like
almost.
the result of the game, right?
Yeah.
I like we can duke it out for 20 minutes and then all we send is I won or I lost.
Yeah.
Like that's yeah, definitely interesting.
Okay, so hey, let's bring this back to kind of the Christian viewpoint here.
Oh
So,
sure.
in terms of how evangelization and just bringing about, you know, awareness of the kingdom of God, so to speak, in Web 2, I think that the ball was dropped in terms of like when the Vatican started putting all the documents on the internet, when the Bible started becoming more accessible. And I guess here's where we can kind of get to the point where it's like, okay, we have all this data that's finally on Web 2, but how do we translate that stuff onto Web 3 platforms that help promote it better, help just bring awareness to it better than what happened when it all got ushered onto Web 2 finally when they started using word processors. It's something that I think about sometimes, just like if we're talking about building back all these other applications better, how do we build up our points of evangelization stronger in this new Wild West, basically?
I wonder if it'll just look different, right? So we keep saying Web three. I don't know if we all have the same agreement here, but I've seen a lot of people say Web one was read only, and Web two was read and write, and then Web three is read write own. If you want to throw that in, but so you can put the Bible up on the internet or any document, any religious document, and as a simple like read only file, and like that's Web one. Like we can we can put that on the blockchain if we wanted, but I don't know if it's the same thing. And so with Web two, you have you could then more personally evangelize on Twitter or Reddit or any of these platforms because you're actually interacting with people, right? This is maybe forums are Web one. I don't know where we draw the distinction, but the more you interact with people, the more like that's what Web two brought, was this kind of interactivity. And so I don't know. I almost wonder it will like will that, can that be enhanced in Web three, or will things look different in Web three? I wonder. I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about it too. I'm still thinking about the question, but just to expand on the question a little bit.
And
Um,
this is where we might have to, appeal to some people that have been doing this already in the space to see what it
mhm.
looks like. Because, obviously from our vantage point where we sit, it's not like we're privy to everything that's happening out there. So this is where I think we could get some others that might know more of this avenue than ourselves. And yeah, this is where I feel like we're getting to a point where we can start bringing on guests on the show, to talk about these things and just to bring awareness to stuff that we don't even know about, or audience don't even know about for that matter. So just to continue this conversation and bringing about what our mission is with this podcast and with this project. So yeah.
Connor, any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had heard a lot of people ask this question before, and I don't know. It's just it's almost not something that totally interests me because I feel like, I mean, it does. I don't. It sounds bad, but of course, everything is about like evangelizing and how can we advance the mission of the church. But to me, it's almost like we can do that even without the web. I think the
Hmm.
real mission, the mission field happens when you're communicating with people, and when you're talking to people one on one and having like actual, dialogue. And that can happen on the web. That can happen on the internet. That can happen on Web3. The mission of the church doesn't really have to change as the technology changes. We can just start to use technologies in different ways. So that's true. And I guess I feel like there's people out there that are kind of given that mission to do that. And they need to do that. That's like their mission. But to me, particularly when I look at Web3 from a Christian perspective, the failure of Web 2 was not so much just that we were late to use the technology, like you say, it's that we didn't really game theory the future. And so now we live in a world where it's very difficult to use the technology the way we want. And it wasn't just because we didn't upload the Bible to the internet, soon enough. It's that we want influencing the conversation and we want building in the space in such a way that we can preserve, our ability to access and use the tools. So I think that's the most important. That's the biggest thing the church can do. I even said this. I said this to somebody. I said, like, the Vatican should be buying governance tokens.
Mm.
Though that's where people are going to be making decisions about where the internet goes and Web3 goes in the future. I mean, that might be like an extreme statement. They should
No,
buy potential what
Connor,
could become securities
it's
in the
not.
future.
It'd be better than half of the junk they invest in. Sorry,
Well, no,
just
not even as an investment. Like this is not like a money
I
making
know,
thing. Like
but
this
I'm
is
just
like,
saying. I
yeah,
get what you're saying, but seriously, you should see where they put their money. It's in the
yeah.
pretty
That's
dumb places.
it's very fun.
But yeah, like we just need to game theory the future and go, hey, where is the technology going? Where could it go? And we need to be here to influence, so that we can use these tools in the future. Not just so we can figure out how to use them, but so we can actually use them in the future.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I do think there is something. So again, this brings us back to where we started, right? Governance versus and mutability versus immutability and kind of these really good smart contracts. Um, I think there's something to be said for building excellent things, right? Writing a beautiful smart contract that doesn't need people to make changes to it. I publish it, I remove my own ownership of it. Everybody can use it, and everybody uses it and benefits from it. It's a public good. But there is that side too, that as these protocols are kind of gaining ground in the space, I do think it would be helpful and useful to have some governance say in that. But I don't know. I'm just saying, I think there's another way to do that too. If we make good, just beautiful, elegant, smart contracts, and just let them be open, I think that would be a great thing as well.
No,
No, absolutely. And when you're pursuing operational excellence, that's the pursuit of virtue. So, yeah, 100%.
no, I actually agree with you, Matt. Like that's a better way to do it. Like not just in the governance side of things, like we need to be building in the space. We need Christians building in the space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree.
For sure.
All right.
Just a little tangential here. I was thinking about this. I know, throwback to the Catholic Crypto Conference. I remember there was somebody talking about the metaverse. And so this is, we all know metaverse does not necessarily mean, or virtual reality does not necessarily mean Web3. You can integrate them, but they don't have to be integrated. And I do think that when we talk about meeting people and talking to individuals, I think the more that people want to upload themselves into this space, I think the more important it is to be in those spaces they're uploading themselves to, which is good. And then especially as these and then again, talking about building excellent things, I think building beautiful things in virtual reality, I think will definitely appeal to people. Churches, I don't know, I'm biased here, but I love going to a city and seeing the beautiful churches there. I love walking into them and just seeing how cool they are. And so I think if we, even if we just build beautiful looking spaces in a metaverse, it would attract people. People would want to come just to look at it. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree.
All right. I think we're all in agreement. As usual, we always end up in agreement at the end of the episodes. Um, Appreciate anybody that's been watching, listening. It's been an interesting ride. Starting to get some traction, which we're excited about, because it just means we get to have more of these awesome conversations with other people that that have a Christian worldview and want to be in the world in the Web3 crypto space, and we just couldn't be more grateful for that. Please like, comment, review, subscribe, download, subscribe, resubscribe wherever podcasts are found. We appreciate it all the more, and just want to keep bringing these episodes out to you. Just keep improving the quality of our conversation as we're continuing to go through some of these growing pains that every podcast goes through. So we're going to keep bringing it the best we can, and just hope that you all stay blessed, and just wishing you all the best. And thank you for taking the time to listen to us. So with that being said, this has been the Crypto Conversion Podcast, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Peace.